Hello, everyone, and welcome to the November 2021 Complexity Weekend. This is the opening live stream. We're going to have a 25-minute tune played by Michael Garfield, Future Fossils, one of our awesome facilitators whose music we often play before live streams. So please enjoy the next 25 minutes of cybernetic tunes and start in the chat on Keybase or the YouTube live chat, and we will begin the organizers' opening live stream and interactive Jamboard session with facilitators in just a few minutes at the top of the hour. So thanks everyone for joining and participating. See you very soon. Well, hello everyone. Thanks for joining Complexity Weekend, November 2021. It is November 12th, 2021, at least where we are, some of us. So thanks a ton for joining. If we could just all go around, Blue, Evelyn, and Sean, in that order, just introduce ourselves and then all get ready for the rest of the slides.
So I'm Blue Knight. I'm an organizer here at Complexity Weekend, and I think this is my third Complexity Weekend that I've also served as a facilitator. And I'll pass it to Evelyn.
Everyone, I'm tuning in from Minneapolis. Really excited to get to meet all of you. This is my first time participating in a Complexity Weekend and also doing it as an organizer. I want to encourage everyone to share whatever's going on social media. We are Complex Weekend on Twitter and Complexity Weekend on LinkedIn and Facebook.
Yay! I'm Sean. I've been an organizer since the beginning for Complexity Weekend. Really excited for this cohort. This is, I think, going to be the best one yet. I'm really excited for things that we're trying out this cycle, such as having live sessions every even hour and office hours and unstructured time every odd hour. I think it's going to produce a lot of time for teams to work together and learn by doing. Thanks, Evelyn and Blue, for organizing. JP is also an organizer, and Jessica, which we'll see later. And yeah, I'm just excited to get going. Dan, you ready to rock?
Yes. So we have a lot of fun things to cover and interact with you on for this first opening live stream. In the first hour of the live stream, we're going to go through the organizer's introduction and talk about the people, tooling, ideas of Complexity Weekend, go over our community purpose, values, and guidelines, give an overview of the program, and acknowledge all the roles that helped make this process occur, and give a few last overarching comments before we jump to a Jamboard, which is a tool that we're going to be using throughout the weekend during the live streams, as well as accessible from our cohort gather space. And we'll just hang out, have all kinds of interesting discussions. And these live streams are just like the tips of the iceberg, because it's really all about the interactions and the energy you're going to bring to it in the Keybase and Gather. So let's get right into it with a weekend overview. Would someone like to give a quick weekend overview? And then anyone else can provide a comment.
Let me take the first few slides maybe, and then maybe we'll try to do like the slides in quarters. So yeah, basically this is the overall arc to the weekend. So the thing about the weekend that's interesting is, it's roughly 2 to 3 days, but there's kind of a narrative arc to it. If you choose to participate in the mode of joining a team, engaging with all these different diverse participants, and learning complexity by doing it that way, which you don't have to. But if you do, then that's kind of what the arc is built around. Today is mostly going to be us as individuals, us learning together through discussion and all the exposure to all these different perspectives. It's going to, we're going to be sense making together. What is complexity? Like, this is the perfect time to kind of ask these big questions and try to start to reach any sort of answer, personal answer or collective answer. And then as we get into Saturday, into kind of the middle of the weekend, that's when we're really going to be starting to identify team seeds, or like what collaborations are starting to form, or do I want to start a team? Do I want to join a team? And just that kind of sense in our cohort of what activities are going on. And our big goal as organizers is anyone who wants to be on a team will find their way onto a team and become a valued and respected member of that team. So we're going to be doing a lot of work in the middle there to make sure everyone's matched up to teams that wants to be in our cohort. And then toward the end of the weekend is really when we're going to be communicating to each other about what teams did form, of the teams that want to, share in that way. Just talking about what problems they might want to work on together, what solution ideas have been thrown around so far, what approaches they're taking, how they might continue as a team after the weekend, because this is just a weekend, right? This is a blip in time. There's no chance of really solving any of these really complex, big problems that we're interested in tackling here over a weekend. So it's really about what happens after the weekend. If you choose to continue in that way, that's also not a requirement. So that's pretty much the full arc. We'll have this opening live stream now. We have a live stream in the middle while the team seeds are being identified and everything. And then at the last day on Sunday, we're going to have a closing live stream. And that's where we're going to invite all the teams that would like to participate in this way to share to the cohort on these public live streams. So that's kind of the overall arc. Blue, Evelyn, Dan, want to add anything to this slide?
We'll return to many of these ideas as we continue. So Sean, continue.
Sure. Yeah, so one key URL for the whole weekend experience is the single source of truth. So there's a bit.ly URL right there. Bookmark this if you haven't already, because this has lots of great information. This is the only place you really need to go. All the information is represented here. So we wanted to be very thoughtful for this fully online event, that there aren't a bunch of different URLs you have to keep track of, right? There's one URL and it has links to other things you might need. So it has things like in the first tab, key links and information. There's all sorts of stuff there. There's links to the pre-weekend playlist if you want to take time at any point during an unstructured hour to watch some of the videos, especially for any facilitators you might want to engage with shortly. There's lots of information there. There's guides to Keybase and Gather if you want to just get better at the tooling for how to engage during the weekend. There's the program itself, which has an hour-by-hour play. This is a global event, so there's 200 people in the Keybase team from all over the world. So all time zones are going to be active during this weekend, and the program really reflects that. Every single hour of the day, there's something going on. Even hours have live sessions, odd hours have office hours, or just unstructured time. And you really have to pace yourself to make sure that you're participating the best that you can for your own personal situation. Make sure you're sleeping, make sure you eat, take breaks from the screen. Like, that's all very important, because it will be nonstop. There will be nonstop activity. And so we just want to make sure everyone has a healthy relationship with this event and this community. The other thing is also a really brief information on the facilitators. You can get especially their Keybase handles. We're all in Keybase at Complex Weekend at November 2021, the cohort Keybase team. So anyone can reach anyone on Keybase right now. And we really encourage it. Those one-on-one connections or those group connections in the Explore channels or any of that, those are so important as an asynchronous way to interact and engage as a cohort during this weekend and beyond, and as we have for the pre-weekend. So that just gives you a little bit of information about each facilitator. I think we've got maybe 30 or 35 facilitators that are amazing individuals who are here to help mentor you and help guide you or share information with you. They're a resource, so make sure that you use them. And then lastly, team registration, which we'll talk about in the middle live stream a little more. But that's where, when you identify you want to work on a team or you want to open up a team to new participation, you can register your team at a URL in that tab. And that will signal to all of us in the cohort that you exist and that we can help you potentially. Blue, Evelyn, any comments?
Just to kind of, go
yeah.
for it, Sean.
No.
Oh, just the first tab, key links. There's the weekend live streams. That's a public playlist. And then there's the pre-weekend video playlist with the facilitator introductions. So that's not to be shared outside of the cohort. You'll also find all links you need, and of course, the program. So, like Sean said, it's all time zones, which we'll talk more about, but there's continuous activity for some people, but everyone has a different schedule or availability, so no stress, no fear of missing out. It's how much you show up for is what you're going to experience. And, if you have 2 hours of linear conversation, that's what's going to happen. If you send 50 Keybase messages to 50 different people and attend 7 sessions, that's going to be a little bit different in terms of the impact on you. Any other comments on the program before we continue?
I think one quick comment would just be, if you just take a brief glance at the slide here at the different event titles, I mean, the diversity that we have in our cohort is amazing. From all the different perspectives that are brought to the table here, the thing that brought us all here, which we'll get into a little bit, is interest in complexity, interest in understanding patterns across systems. But the different specific representations that are here in our cohort of how complexity is embodied in different systems, it's astounding. And that's the thing I always get every time at a complexity weekend, is just it's the most diverse group of people I've ever met, globally, by perspective, by background, by training, all of that. And so every interaction that I have is like I'm learning from a new perspective. And so really take advantage of that and make sure you hit the not just the live sessions that are resonate with you already, but like challenge yourself. Go out and try something you've never even been exposed to before.
Great. So, on to talk a little bit about Complexity Weekend, the community of practice. Sean, do you want
Actually, Dan, do you want to do these slides?
Yeah, we'll go relatively rapidly through these slides. History is important for complex systems. Their sensitivity to initial conditions and the developmental trajectories that they take. So our first incipient Complexity Weekend was in person in San Francisco, California in May 2019. And while we were planning for the next would have been in-person weekend, things changed. And so since 2020, we've been going all online, which has really been amazing. And we look forward to when local hubs will be able to sprout up worldwide. But today and through Deep Time, we're online. We've had 4 now. We're in the 4th online weekend, 2 in 2020, 2 in 2021. And we've just seen growth and development of our cohort, and the structure and the feedback that we've received is so essential. Several things that are incorporated into this weekend cohort were just not present in last weekend cohort. So for another day to recount them, but things have changed a lot and it's been an awesome ride. What facilitates that is this rhythm and a commitment to it through Deep Time. We have 2 weekend cohorts per year, and those are cohort-based, where there's a pre-weekend phase and a lot of engagement and making sure that everybody is able to participate really actively in the weekend, however they show up. And then the other 10 months per year, we have smaller, informal drop-in heartbeat events. So there's no asynchronous component, there's no keybase required, it's just drop into a gather link, just one link. So it's perfect for people who just want a taste of the community and they want to see what they're getting into, as well as for those across different weekend cohorts who'd like to connect. And so it's really awesome to have the heartbeats and the rhythm of the month, and then also the 2 big weekends per year. And that's the green line, the community energy oscillating through time. And then there's you on your complexity journey and your dyadic relationships and your teams. So there's so much more to say about that multi-scale complexity journey, but I'll pass it to anyone else. And just note that all of these events are co-organized in a totally participatory fashion with an absolutely co-equal co-organizer set. So if you ever want to get involved with co-organizing or facilitating, get in contact with us.
So I'll jump in and talk a little bit about like the heartbeat events. This is like a really great opportunity to reconnect with your team. And really, if you have a team, you can ask yourself and maybe your teammates why you're here. Like, are you here to learn something, form a study group, just dabble? Are you just like window shopping, or are you like really serious about getting stuff done? Because if you're really serious about getting stuff done, you need to have like those weekly meetings to keep up that regular energy to push a project forward. And so the heartbeat is a great opportunity for that, or maybe even more than that. Maybe you want like a bi-weekly meeting or a weekly meeting. I like weekly meetings because I tend to not do anything on a project until the day before the meeting, but I'm a super procrastinator. Everyone is different and people work in more structured and less structured ways. So I just encourage you to, ask yourself why you're here. Why is your team forming? What is it that you really want to accomplish? Measurable, deliverable outcomes. And then once you have those, like, what's it going to take to work towards them?
Thanks, Blue. And also just, if at any point, welcome to organizer Jessica as well. Mute, please, Jessica. I'm going to mute you for now, but please mute the YouTube live stream in the background. And then when people want to speak, just go to the bottom bar and just raise your hand, and we'll know to pass it to you then. Thanks, Jessica. So all of this organization is accomplished through a role-based participatory community of practice. The biggest circle is participants. That's everyone. Everyone here, if you're listening to it, is a participant. Within participants, there's so many different ways to participate, and that's something I know we're going to explore in the coming streams and hours. There are also facilitators and organizers are participants as well. We're also either a facilitator or a participant. So that's what it's about, participating in the community of practice. And there's two big doorways in. There's the monthly heartbeat events, which we just described. And then there's the biannual weekend cohorts, which if you're listening to, you're in one. Then there are the teams. And it's not mandatory to be on a team. It's not required, but we're there to help, one, individuals who want to be on a team find a team. And then two, teams that form inside or outside of Complexity Weekend to succeed in complex environments. So here's the teams and the committees, which we'll talk more about later in the weekend. And then there's the associates and the supporters who provide financial and non-financial support. Often they're participants themselves, other times from external. So if anybody would like to give a thought on the role-based organization.
Blue or Evelyn or Jessica, you want to talk about it?
Sure, I'll give a quick thought. Just also the committees, right? So I'm not sure if you mentioned those, but you can participate as a participant or an organizer or facilitator, but we have separate committees like for the gather space, for the wiki, which we'll talk more about. So if you want to participate maybe in more of a participant role, but you're not really sure whether you're ready to facilitate or organize, you can also take on a committee role, which is important and necessary and helps us keep going.
Awesome.
I'll add to that.
Uh-huh.
So this is my first time participating in one of these events, and I am serving as an organizer. I want to say that really it's a pleasure to do, and to not be afraid that there's, for any of these roles, there's also kind of a degree to which you want to kind of choose your own adventure. And so if you want to kind of see behind the scenes and get that experience, organizing is a really great way to get involved.
Thank you, Evelyn. Let's talk about that biggest circle, the participants. So there's 1,001 axes of diversity and variation that are important for our community, but just to kind of enter at the top level, we have about 160 participants, and they're coming from 56 countries. So every time zone that's plausible is represented, and we also have about 30% from the US and 70% from the non-US, and we're always looking to have a truly global presence in our cohort. On the right side, there's a graph of our registration data, and the questions were, what is your familiarity, self-assessed, no test, of learning complexity on the x-axis and applying complexity on the y-axis. And each dot is like a person in that learning, applying space. And what's awesome is it runs the gamut from 1 to 10 on both. There's people who are very unfamiliar with complexity learning and or applying. So especially to them, we just commend their bravery for joining such a community of practice, as well as for those who have so much to share, who have a lot of familiarity, and everybody along the way, because as we'll say again and again, there's so many aspects to complexity, so many things to learn, and so many problems to apply it to, that we really are all going to be learning from one another. And that's the fun of learning and applying complexity. If anybody has a thought, just give the raised hand. Otherwise, we'll continue. A word cloud was drawn from the registration question: which kinds of problems or topics are you most interested in applying complexity science to? So this isn't just a community of podcast listening or a community of shared attention. Community of practice is about thinking where we'd like to apply complexity and what we'd like to apply it to. So again, there's so much that could be said about this word cloud. I'll just give the one first and obvious point that we always make, which is that some words are bigger than others. And so the bigger words are words that more people used in their free text response. So these are words like systems, complexity, dynamics, networks, social and science. These are some of the big themes that unite our interest in applying complexity. And then trailing off into fonts unseen are this long tail of words that maybe only one person used. So every perspective is important because each person might be bringing some interest in application that really can catalyze a relationship or a team that could go on to have impact. So we have some topics and concepts, things that we want to apply complexity to, and 4 out of 5 people you talk to are going to be like, I put that on my registration form too. And then there's something else where maybe only one person in the whole cohort, maybe you, maybe someone you'll talk to, is going to bring a totally unique perspective that just had never occurred to you. Sean?
Yeah, I think I just want to reinforce that point in that long tail distribution of this word cloud, and that I really, this deck is linked in the participant single source of truth, right in the program actually, for this live stream slot. I would challenge everyone to click this, go to this slide, and really zoom into this picture and try to identify some of these smaller words, things like, economy, distributed artificial biology, collective, mental, right? Like there's even smaller, I can't even, I got to zoom in, food, right? These are things that I would encourage everyone to try to link those, because if you link up the edges of this long tail distribution, that's where the magic happens, right? The big words here are so generic that they're in all these different systems, but they're not really applicable. It's things like systems and complexity, which we'll find over the weekend. You have to unpack it kind of into a specific context. But if you really talk about, food and cryptocurrency, how do those go together, right? How do they unpack complexity into that particular combination of specifics? Like that's really where I think rubber meets the road. Maybe advance the slide.
Great. So this word cloud are gifts to the cohort from ourselves, from us to us. What are you looking to contribute to the Complexity Weekend community of practice? So here we see that some large terms that a lot of people are saying that they bring to the table, like their knowledge, their perspective and background, their experience, a can-do attitude, maybe data, maybe skills with data, or the specific data sets that are important for a given question. And then, again, this is the whole long tail contribution of so many unique contributions. So everyone, by showing up, is giving their unique contribution. And then there's also the ones that we share. And so the contributions that we have in common, they harmonize and they are more than the sum of their parts. And then the same could be said for when we have different contributions to make. And so there's so much cool interactions that will happen amongst these contributions. And it's one thing to see a word cloud or to see a vector of text answers in a spreadsheet, but it's a community of practice. It's actually us who are allocating our attention and our time and our energy to make these contributions for the right context and project. Okay. And anyone who wants to add like a comment or a question in the YouTube live chat, that's great for us who are awake right now. For those of you who are rewatching, it's linked in the SSOT, our slides. You can add comments. And of course, it's about what we bring to the cohort, gather, and keybase spaces. One more important axis of variation in our cohort is our backgrounds, or our kind of current field or sector. So we asked on the registration survey about individuals' backgrounds, and participants could select from multiple options. So sometimes there's more than one role. And then also there was a long tail of unique answers, people who had very many unique positions and combination sectors. We see about 30% who might be a student of some type or in academia, 25 or so percent who are in the nonprofit area. And this just represents some of the major areas that we come from. And these could be our day jobs or our expertise. And sometimes people want to apply and learn complexity in their sector. Other times it's so far afield that it's amazing. Any other comments?
I think, one quick comment on that slide is just that in the Keybase team, especially in the pre-weekend, I feel like a lot of people feel like this whole cohort is academic, or like that any one group here is we're all that. And I think it's important to keep in mind all the different ways that different groups participate, and that some might be over amplified in a text-based context. But now that we're maybe in a fully synchronous context for the whole weekend, now a lot of the other verticals might be more present than you thought, like nonprofits or even, government or any of that. So I think that we're all here. That's the key, is like, this is a very diverse cohort. All these modes are represented. It's just a matter of seeking it out now and finding those interactions, either through live sessions or just walking around Gather and saying, hey, entering into a little coffee table, space with others, and hey, what are you guys talking about? So don't encourage that.
Great. So as we head to talk about our purpose, values, and guidelines, first, Sean, and then anyone else who wants to comment, what's the big complex systems perspective on why we're a value and guideline driven community of practice?
For sure. I'll cover this first slide, and if you want to do the other value slides. We put the slide in here because it's we as organizers think of Complex Weekend as a complex adaptive system. This is like our system of study of unpacking and learning by doing with. And so this figure is really great because it really shows you all the different kind of feedback loops that are going on in a complex adaptive system. So we're about to talk about our values and our guidelines for participation, which fit right into this model. So we're about to broadcast from top down some, what is the purpose, why we're all here, what are the values of our community, right? And those have come about from the bottom, where people have interacted in the early cohorts and have taught us collectively what our values are. So it's kind of this infinite kind of feedback loop of us defining through our interactions the top level purpose and values, and ultimately the atomic guidelines of, as an individual, how can I go about enacting these values? And so it propagates upward from interactions. We create that novel cultural information and community information, and then it broadcasts back down again when we do these live streams, and we show everyone these are why we're here. These are our values. They're not unchangeable. They will change and evolve as our community changes and evolves. But at this moment in time, we can broadcast the top level information back down again as individuals, so that for the weekend, as we are participants, especially when Blue talks about the participation guidelines, you can keep in mind these values and how to embody them, because that's really what allows us to remain a coherent, effective community of practice, and to keep evolving it as the times change, as our external environment, as in this diagram, changes. We should be able to adapt if we can stick to this way of guiding our behavior.
Thank you, Sean. So Blue and Evelyn, please take it away.
Sure. So why are we all here? Hopefully you know why you're here. But like I said earlier, we don't really know if we're here to work on a project or maybe just learn a little bit or dabble, get our feet wet, explore complexity. But we all definitely have a shared purpose and interest in complex systems. And we want to be part of a team that's creating and learning together, learning by doing. And so we all kind of have a shared level of core values that we've established as a community, and these are always open to feedback and additions as well. Do you want to flip to the next one?
Or Evelyn, do you want to give any comments if you here? Or all right, whenever you want to, just raise the hand. Go for it, Blue.
So we learn complexity science by doing, and this has to happen over deep time. So whether it's through biannual events, monthly events, weekly meetings with your team, you're not going to learn it in a weekend. And here we include to innovate. So we have a strong mandate for diversity, both in discipline and cultural practices. So it's really, if you're with a team of data scientists and that's your team, nobody's going to really bridge out to kind of embrace the interdisciplinary nature that complexity science is. So just jump in if you're a beginner onto a new team, and you're going to bring insight, even if you're from some way far out field. You're going to bring insight, even if it's just a beginner mindset, to any team that you join.
Yeah, I wanted to emphasize one thing I'm really excited about with this community is that we're a bunch of people from a lot of different fields that are interested in complexity theory, but also we're interested in applying it to big world problems. So I think this complexity science, by doing, the fact that we're getting into these teams, that we're tackling these problems, we're going to realize more and more about what the challenges are of tackling these problems when we bring our collective skills together. I want to encourage everyone to make use of the diversity in this group by reaching out to new people, joining teams that are of interest to you, but you don't necessarily know yet how you could contribute. The idea is we're creating this environment to allow for new connections that we wouldn't otherwise have realized could happen.
And I also just wanted to highlight a feedback question in the live chat was, what does doing look like? What does learn by doing look like? And we're going to return to that in the Jamboard in the second part of this stream and have many perspectives and examples and answers to that very important question, which we're all always asking.
Evelyn, do you want to take the core values here?
Sure. So as Sean had described before, Complexity Weekend and our community itself is a complex system. The education, the self-learning that we're doing here, self-teaching that we're doing here is active. So we'll talk more about this complexity science by doing. Teamwork makes the dream work. Participation means accessibility and inclusion for all. So, look over our values document and just kind of be present and consider, be aware of the group dynamics and eliciting everyone's input. Respect is key, of course. And if there's a topic that you're really excited about, but you're not seeing a space for discussing already, step up and be brave. Start a new group and see who else is interested.
Or even just an explore channel. Sorry, Sean.
That was good. I think I just want to highlight one thing on this slide, which is one thing that's really unique about this community practice is that we do have such a diverse group of participants, and that trickles into the teams, right? The teams have very diverse perspectives. And what does it really take to maximize that diversity in order to actually produce work together and actually affect change? And I think it takes some of these bullets in here, like respect, accessibility, inclusion. Like those ideas are so important because if you can actually infuse the team environment or even the community environment that we're in here and Gather with these properties, it's going to allow people to speak up. It's going to allow people to share their diverse perspectives and feel like they're being heard and feel like they're being valued. If we go against those values, they're going to shut down, and we're actually not going to get any of the benefits of having this group together. So those are, I would almost highlight as some of the most important values is really actively creating a respectful environment, an accessible environment, and being patient, right? Because everyone's going to have communication barriers of all sorts of types. Just being patient and working through it because it's so worth it to work through it. And if you're going to use any terms that are specific to your fields, you can use them because there's meaning in them, there's value in them, but just unpack them first. Do things that allow it to be accessible so that others can join you in the understanding. Yeah.
Thank you, Sean, and everyone. So, Blue?
So guidelines for participation, adopting a complexity thinking mindset, which is, being open to other disciplines, but also beware of the speech that you use and kind of check in with your group or your team. We all come from different backgrounds and tend to use jargon that might not be like a shared basis of reality. Or you could also be like using a term in a way that's completely different or foreign that it might mean two different things in two different fields. So that happens. So just kind of check in. You can see like when other people are glazing over that maybe they don't understand you. So just be extra attentive when you're working in a transdisciplinary team. And this is also communication is key between teams and the relationships that we have here, and just what your expectations are with sharing of ideas or data. If you don't want to have an idea shared, this is a seeding community. Nobody holds a patent, right? This is not a patent forming hackathon, maybe is the way to say it. So if you're not open to sharing your idea, then maybe consider not sharing it. But if you are open, this is definitely the field for cross fertilization. Embrace technology, but know its limits. So Gather can be kind of laggy, especially when there's 100 of us there. You have to refresh the screen sometimes. It's not perfect. We do love it because it's like this natural kind of environment, but it can be challenging and kind of like a hurdle for first-time users. It can kind of be difficult to overcome. So try to help others, try to be mindful of, the technology boundaries, and some people might have better internet than others and all these types of things. And appreciate, diverse abilities. Like I just said about internet, it's not that that's a skill, but, we also might have different skill sets, and try to embrace each other's talents and differences and allow full participation on the teams that you form. Reach out on the edges and stay involved. And if you're having a hard time kind of connecting with a team or finding that idea, just reach out to one of the organizers, and we're here to kind of help you find your fit, maybe.
Great.
I was curious to hear from Jessica about the participation guidelines. Just having been in a past cohort, several of us have been in past cohorts, but having been in a past cohort and then being on the organizing side this time, how did you interface with the guidelines in that first cohort when you were a participant? What are some advice maybe you could give to first-time participants?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I think you've all covered it already, but
You're muted, Jessica.
Oh.
No, it's okay. Continue.
Okay. Don't be afraid to drop in and kind of listen what the other people are talking about if you're really not sure where you're going to fit. I think something that happened when I was in the first cohort is participation cohort is a lot of people started out in 3 to 4 groups, and then they find that one group may not be going where they want to go, so they've got another group to stay in and participate. Don't feel bad if you lose interest in that group. You want to move over to another group. That's fine too. That's part of the discovery process. And then just communication. Just keep letting your teammates know, and keep. A lot of times teams would communicate through Keybase to let them know when they would be online to work at specific times.
Thanks. And like everything else in these slides and in our community of practice, it's all about the feedback and the iteration. And so that's how we plan and implement through Deep Time, is we iterate and we develop. So we incorporate people's feedback into what specific ways does embracing technology but knowing its limits, what does that look like as Gather changes its interface, and as internet accessibility changes and devices change and your personal sleep and wake cycles change. So keep complex thinking in mind. And there's an opportunity to co-create our values as well. In this bit.ly link and in our Living in Purpose values document, you'll see many strata of comments and edits that people have made. And it's overdue for a pruning and reformatting, which we're going to do. And so this is just to say that everybody can co-create and participate, connecting and colliding and just being here and showing up, as well as facilitating and catalyzing participation, right? The facilitators are not giving a lecture, giving a speech, they're not recorded. It's facilitating something, and that's actually your participation. And then there's organizing, who are like the facilitator's facilitator. We're just catalyzing the facilitators so that they can show up. That's second level or second order cybernetics. And it's all part of the same distributed system. So I hope that people who are intrigued or feel like they could contribute to that type of a system take a look at this document and get involved with us, because there's a lot of room to develop and grow. In the last 20 minutes of the organizer introduction, we're going to talk about the tools of the weekend and also the role-based acknowledgement. And then in 20 minutes, we're going to bring some facilitators on. We're going to jump over to the Jamboard, and we'll just go wherever the conversation goes. It's super fun. There's going to be participants adding comments and facilitators sharing their perspective as well. But first, we'll talk about the tools. So, Jessica, would you like to begin with giving an overview of the tools?
Sure. So team chat is going to happen mostly in Keybase, and using the chat and gather is not going to be saved, and it's not going to be specific to your group. So the key is to communicate with your team in Keybase. We have the complexity weekend.november 2021. You can browse all the channels. You can find the different team information. You can invite people and leave your team. Now, we ask that you post your introductions, hashtag introductions, and you can post requests to ask for new Explore channels. And if is this correct? We're going to be using the Explore channels for the different teams.
Well, they're kind of like a team seating area. You can just request one if you think, what if we want to explore quantum or explore blockchain or some other topic, explore art, explore poetry, and other people will click that gear and opt in, whether it's their day job or they're also just curious. And it's in these smaller explore channels where maybe there's 8 or there's 20 people who are sharing resources, and it's a little bit more coherent, and that's an awesome spot for teams to arise. Okay.
Thanks for clarifying that up. And if you need a team and you're not sure where you want to go ahead and hashtag I need a team with dashes between the words, and that way if someone's looking for a teammate, that might be a good place to meet people.
And also I'll just point at introductions. So go ahead and leave an introduction. Just say hello. Let other people know that you're showing up to participate with them in the cohort, and then just be prolific with the emoji if you feel like it, because they're free and they're fun, and it helps other people know that they've been seen. So you don't need to reply to everything or send a message every single time, but it's easy to just let someone know that you've seen and appreciated and responded and given thought to what they had to add, because that's kind of a special thing when we can actually connect in a little bit of a smaller space using digital technology. And requests, of course, if you have any kind of request at all, just ask, as well as questions or tech support. If something's not working, the organizers are there to help make it work. How about Gather?
Okay, so Gather, if you're not familiar with it, you have settings. You can edit your icon as you move around. You can chat with people. Now, something to be aware of is you have to often select if you want chat to go to everybody. Did we have that turned on for this?
So in the chat tab, you can select nearby or everyone, and I'm showing it on the live stream, or you can send a message to just a single person. But also for single person messages, our Keybase usernames are in our Gather names. So you could just go over to Keybase and send a message to that person there. Continue, Jessica.
Okay.
Thanks.
And that works as well. If you need to see the map, so you can see where you're at. You go down to the lower end of the screen and you show the map. You can also share your screen. This is great if you're working in teams and you're wanting to share what you're doing on your computer screen. And then especially in situations where there might be a speaker or someone speaking, you want to raise your hand, you can raise your hand using the status and the emoji. Do we need to cover something else?
That's great. I just raised my hand so that people can see it's the smiley face on the bottom and raising your hand. So like it's kind of a give and a receive. You know, when you want to speak, it's really helpful to use the raise hand and help propagate that norm. And then also make an effort to look for who on the sidebar or who in your chat tab is raising their hand, because it's not always easy to jump into a conversation. Maybe the face is small, or there's cultural differences in cues or timing or lag. Just make it easy on everybody. Make sure that we'll hear from everybody by smiley face, raising your hand, and you will be addressed. And that will be a very healthy norm. Sean, with a raised hand. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the one point I'll add to the slide is that what makes Gather really unique is that you have agency in this space, right? You can use the arrow keys to move around, and you can bring yourself into spaces. You can take yourself out of spaces, and that's something that I really like compared to, like, say, a Zoom breakout room where you're kind of sent to it and then kind of trapped there until the time's out, right? This really gives you control to be where you want to be and interacting in ways you want to interact. So if you want to be a live session, use the arrow keys, go on up there. Understand that there are private spaces, and that there's when you're not in a private space, it's proximity based, when you can see the audio and video, or hear the audio and see the video of anyone around you. But if you step into a private space, only people in the private space can hear or see you. And that could be a 2-person one-on-one mat as a private space. That could be a whole big rug of everyone in there having a big discussion. Right? There's lots of context to kind of explore and figure out in this cohort gather space that we have. But those are the fundamentals that get you going, of understanding what types of interactions you might have.
Thank you, Sean. Sean, would you also like to give an overview, or Jessica, please?
Go for it, Jessica.
Okay, so to give an idea of the directory, we have our central cafe, and underneath the cafe, you can transport to different areas. So if you step on one of those, it'll take you to the live sessions, the garden area, or the team co-working areas as well. And it's a great way to move around, but as you get in there, feel free to explore, walk around, just don't hesitate to try things as you come across them. Is there anything that you want to add?
Well, just that the space is editable, and it was customized by our awesome Gather committee, which is also participatory. And the idea is that we can keep these spaces in mind. And so when we want to chill, maybe go to the garden. If you want to tune out, there's a space on the bottom right of the central zone. If you want to co-work, then register a team and we'll add a title for a co-working space. And then you can just say, hey, I'm going to be in the garden at this time UTC, and I'm going to just be hanging out listening to this album, or we're going to draw together, or do a poetry reading, or come to the co-working space and we'll meet here. And then, of course, the live session rooms at the top, A, B, and C. That's where all the facilitated sessions are on the even UTC hours. And in the odd UTC hours, where there's always a facilitator office hour, that's just in that center barista cafe. So gives you a lot of spatial agency, check in and out of different spaces in Gather.
Hey, Blue, do you want to maybe cover the next couple slides, just because you've been at so many cohorts so far, and you've kind of seen how Gather's evolved and how the live sessions have evolved?
Sure. So the live session rooms are in Gather. They're every even hour in the live session rooms, and I think we have a couple sessions where we have concurrent live sessions, right? So if anything happens, I think I said this, like, know the limits of your technology. So you don't need to reboot your computer, but just refresh Gather. And also, I think only Chrome and Firefox work with Gather optimally. Like, if you're going to use Safari, you're going to maybe have audio problems. Similarly, Edge doesn't work that well. So I think if, like, for optimal Gather experiences, you want to be using Chrome or Firefox, and any other browser is at your own risk. So use the right browser, refresh if you're having any problems. Like sometimes you cannot hear people or people can't hear you. It gets to kind of be like a little bit weird with a lot of people in Gather. Like with just a few people, 25 people, it should run like really easily. But when we get hundreds of us, it gets kind of crazy. And so in the live session rooms, we have these big green carpets where everyone can hear everyone on the big green carpet. And then I'm not sure what this little carpet is. It's too.
It's basically there in case things get a little weird, like you're describing, and we find that the live session is actually getting kind of disrupted by the Gather technology. It doesn't happen often, but sometimes it does. If that's the case, there is this little green call block, and if you go near it, you can press X to interact with it, like in anything in Gather. And if you press X to interact with it, it actually opens a Jitsi URL. Jitsi is a video call platform that's totally in the browser. So if you go to the URL, you're in a video call. It's like Zoom without needing a Zoom account. And so that URL is unique to each live session room. So if things get a little wonky, just go to that and go to that URL that's in that call block, and everyone can just transfer over into a video call just to make sure everyone can hear each other and understand each other in those situations.
Perfect. And then these little red dots. Oh, no, go ahead. Sorry. These little red dots are one-on-ones. So if you've been to any of the pre-weekend events, you know how these work. This is kind of like a one-on-one partner space. And then the desks over here are one-on-one spaces also, but they have a additional like screen share function. And also, do they also have a whiteboard, or it's just screen share, Sean?
We're hacking the screen share. If you're interested in that one, I'm probably the only one using that. So just come to my live sessions, and then we'll try to learn Python in pairs there.
Cool. And then these little whiteboards are neat for like, pair drawing or other like, get on a board and take notes with one another. So just a really cool setup. If you're facilitating and need help with Gather, reach out. I've done some crazy things in my previous like sessions in Gather. So if you need help, I can help, or any of the other organizers too. Sean has maybe the most skill here. Okay.
One last comment. The orange squares are spotlight squares. So when you're there, you're broadcasting to the whole room, just the live session room you're in, but you cannot hear people. So be extremely mindful of that, because it's disruptive to a conversation. If they're talking and then you just like pop on, they're going to hear you or see you, even if you're muted, but then you won't be able to hear them. So people will pop on to make an announcement and leave. So use that mindfully. Continue with office hours, Blue?
Oh, cool. Yeah. So we will have office hours on the odd hours. And so this is like if you wanted to meet with a facilitator or meet with your group, this is like perfect time. And facilitators can give guidance, help group formation, and also just be available to, harass generally for any kind of relevant question. So we all have skills listed on the website. And if you are looking for a facilitator who knows how to program in Python, maybe Sean's busy. So there's lots of us. And if you need help, we're here to support you.
Thanks, Blue. Sean?
Yeah, just a last few Gather reports, and then we'll move on to the last section of this first hour of the live stream. We have little posters, informational images around the Gather space. So look out for that. It's in the leftmost image here on the slide. You just go up to it like any other object. You press X, it'll expand it. And you can look. It has things like the Gather directory. Some of the slides that we've looked at here just embedded right in the Gather space to kind of give you more context. And then something we're trying out this cohort is actually what Dan pointed out earlier. In the bottom right of the central cafe room is a set of one-person tiles, private spaces. So literally no one can hear or see you when you're in there. So if you just want to go there to kind of relax a little bit, you're not away. People can still know you're around, but you're not interactable at that moment. So you can watch videos, read, you can start doing some work on your own that you may want to prep for something else coming up. And then lastly, the rightmost image, one really great way to find people in the space is you click on them in the participants. You click the two people kind of participants icon on the bottom left of Gather, and you can see all the different participants in the space at that moment. If you click any one of them and you click locate on map, that draws a line between you and them. So that really, if you're trying to find where the live session is going on and you're not sure, was it A, B, or C, I've forgotten the program, just locate the facilitator and it'll bring you right to them.
Thank you, Sean.
Good. So we'll wrap up, I think, just with this last section, which is role-based acknowledgements. It takes a lot of people to bring Complexity Weekend to life. So we just want to go through all those different roles. And any of these roles can be you. That's the key thing is if you're a first-time participant or a returning participant, or you've been a facilitator organizer in the past, everyone's able to step up into these roles, whether you want to do it or you're excited to do it and you want to commit to that particular role. So really happy to have everyone here, including JP, who's not in this live stream, to help organize. It was a really fun time. I think we learned a lot, like we do every time. And there's all of our Keybase handles. So if you ever have questions, reach out to any of us, and we should be able to help unstick you or get you going where you need to go. Next slide.
Great job, organizers, as always. Very fun, and organizing is basically a weekly meeting that is optional, but almost everyone attends every time for about 6 months leading up to the weekend. So that's the total number of meetings. 4 weeks a month, 6 months, 24 hours, plus a little bit of asynchronous work. So this is not an impossible task. And if you see some delta and you want to contribute, oh, they should have done this, or what if they had done that, or they could have 10x'd by doing this, then that's like your inner organizer wanting to contribute. And we want to work with you on every dimension of that, like the art and the outreach and so many other components.
Nice. I love that. The inner organizer. Similarly, inner facilitator. And actually, I'll highlight it before we highlight all our amazing facilitators. If you ever hear that inner facilitator at any point during this cohort, give into it. It could be even when you're on a call and you're like, hey, that person hasn't spoken in a long time. You say, what are your thoughts? That's your inner facilitator, kind of just in that moment coming out. It's really helpful for the whole cohort, your teams, everyone. Want to highlight our facilitators. This is what makes the event so amazing. We've got 30, 35 amazing people from all these different disciplines and perspectives, and they're here for you to help participants have a great experience and learn complexity by doing. They're here to mentor teams. They're here to share their wisdom and their knowledge. They're giving all the live sessions. They pre-recorded videos in the pre-weekend playlist. So and take all that investment that they put into it and utilize it, and go watch as many of those videos as you can over the weekend, because there's really great gems there, and it gives you enough context to go and reach out to them one-on-one on Keybase. This is kind of why they're excited to be here, is to have those interactions. And every facilitator is different. So that's the other thing that's really fun, is that there's so many different ways to facilitate that you can just engage with any number of people on this slide, and you can get exposure to different approaches, and some work for you, some won't. And that's great. Any comments on facilitators, Dan, before we move on?
Just that participant to facilitator pipeline is critical, because you're the one who knows what it's most like to be in Gather and some of the values and guidelines, but also we invite in facilitators all the time. So if you want to suggest somebody, or you yourself would like to be a facilitator, you can try it out at a heartbeat or jump in for a weekend. So facilitators are awesome. Also, we would like to acknowledge our committees. So this is something that we started formalizing during 2021. So it's a key example of the way that as we diversify and elaborate Complexity Weekend as a complex system, we start to scaffold new affordances in our niche for participation. So the committees, which you'll find on the Teams tab, which we'll talk about in the middle live stream, include Gather. So thanks a lot to the Gather crew for making this space great. Legal, finance, outreach, onboarding, wiki, website, and DAO, a distributed autonomous organization. So all of these committees are participatory. So if you would like to get involved, then just message Complexity Team on Keybase or send us an email, because these committees are event separate ways to really develop our community. Sean?
No, that's great. I actually took that screenshot from the participant single source of truth. So if you go to the Teams tab, all this information is right there. You can actually look at some of the clipped text and get the full sense of the scope of those committees, and just reach out to Complexity Team if you want to join. It's just another team. It's just a public team that focuses on Complexity Weekend outcomes.
Awesome. We'd like to thank our awesome associates. So associates are external organizations that have a priceless value, and they contribute in beyond financial ways. So Innovators Box and Monica Kang, who's been a facilitator previous weekends, Remoter Consulting, and Research Mentors, all who bring different perspectives on, not to reduce to only a single word, but facilitation, online collaboration, and research journey. Those hyphens were silent if there were 2 words. Thanks to our associates, though. These are our long-term partners in vision and action in our ecosystem. So again, if this is something that sounds like maybe one of your organizations would like to be an associate and help out during the planning of the weekend and not just slide in a day before, but rather work with the organizers in those 6 months leading up to the weekend and make sure that it can be the most special experience for you, that's an option. And then Sean, take this and then continue on to supporters.
For sure. I think one thing I want to stress about associates is associates are long-term partnerships. Those have strategic value for the organization and for Complexity Weekend, where there's expected participation every biannual weekend. So that's kind of what we're aiming for with an ideal associate relationship. And if that's a lot to to get into right away, if you want to just ease into it a little bit into supporting the community practice, then we can go to the next slide and actually talk about supporters. And supporters are just a one-time thing to start, at least, right? It's for instance, Wolfram Language, who's supporting this cohort. They are providing licenses for their software. They provide facilitators, several cohorts now. They're an amazing organization, and they are focusing on kind of an in-kind support. Financial support is also really helpful. We use that money to honor our facilitators and to pay for the bandwidth of all this. So if anyone out there wants to be a supporter, that's a great way in at a single cohort level. And then if there's great value and partnership there, we can continue on as associates on a more annual standing calendar kind of basis and partnership. And then lastly, everyone out there can be a supporter. We normally, for a weekend cohort, when you go to complexityweekend.com to register, we normally ask for an individual contribution. Normally it's we start around maybe like 150 a person or 250 a person if you're really feeling generous.
USD.
USD. And we actually took that down this cohort because of the website development that we're doing. You'll see it's brand new complexityweekend.com starting next cohort, but we wanted to make sure there weren't too many barriers, such as 2 forms to getting everyone to register. So we actually took that down, and that has impacted our income, this particular cohort, which impacts our ability to give an honorarium to facilitators. And so if anyone out there is having a really great time this weekend, go back to this slide, just go to this PayPal and drop some money, and that will help our whole community practice in the future, but also for this cohort to honor our facilitators.
Thanks for this tidy hour. Just to say, there will never be a financial barrier to participating in Complexity Weekend as one of our core values. So it's optimistic, but we believe that we'll be able to create an ecosystem and a community where that will make sense. So with that being said, thanks for this exactly 1 hour organizer's introduction. Let's have a little bit of a scramble because we're in Gather. We're live streaming from Gather. If Sean could modify, well, for those who are watching live, I just posted the Jamboard link. So go ahead and open that Jamboard link, and we're going to be using that Jamboard link to continue this live stream. So
perfect. I'll let the facilitators in, so they'll be in like a minute or so. And that was awesome. Thanks to all the organizers.
Thanks. So stretch, take a deep breath. Hope everybody is enjoying the live stream so far and the weekend as it begins. And I'll just give a quick overview on Jamboard while other facilitators are joining in. So here we are in the Jamboard link that you're just joining now. And this first slide of the Jamboard has a screenshot of a Jamboard. It's Jamboardception. And that first slide shows you a few of the key ways to use Jamboard. So the first thing is at the top where there's the number of slides, you can hit the right and the left arrows to slide between different slides. And then when you're on a given slide, it's all editable. So if you want to add a note, you go over to that sticky note, and then you can say, hello. If you want to add text, you can click the text box and then click and say, hello. And then that can be resized. It can also be stretched. And you can post images. You can put links. So this is really fun because we get to interact with 2 important groups of people. So first, you who are watching live, you'll be able to be adding things onto the Jamboard and we'll be able to read them on the live stream. They can be anonymous or not. The live streams are public, so keep that in mind. and you can add things. And so it's kind of like feedback at the really fast behavioral time scale with what's on the live stream and the ideas that are coming to mind as you're watching the stream live. And the other important group of people who we're interacting with are those who are not watching live. So many people are sleeping in our cohort right now, or they're busy, they're at work or some other thing. Greeting Edgar. And so for these important cohort participants, the Jamboard is going to be around all weekend, and we're going to keep on returning to it. So the Jamboard is like a resource, especially some of the pages about maybe team formation or interests. And that will allow those who are not watching live, or maybe someone whose time zones or schedule just doesn't intersect with yours at all, they'll be able to contribute equally. So welcome, Edgar.
Hello, Dan. How are you?
I want to just describe the first slide or two, and then we're going to go to an introduction slide, and then I would love to have a hello from you. So on the third slide here, everything related to the timing of all events and activities is in the program tab of the PSSOT, and also your calendar should look something like that. And that should emphasize that there's something there for you every moment of the weekend, and that no one will be expected to participate in all or any specific one of these sessions. But it's a global cohort, global facilitation, so we really wanted to make sure that we have totally even time zone coverage. So on this slide 4, we're going to be starting to get your notes on the intentions of the day. Welcome, Michaela, as well. So
hi,
Edgar and Michaela, it would be awesome to just hear an introduction, hello, and maybe just something about your intention for the day as the live stream viewers start to add notes as well.
Okay, so let me start. Hello, everybody at the Complexity Weekend. This is an exciting place to be. My intention for all the weekend is to interact, to know a lot of people, because this kind of interdisciplinary work has to be done outside of academics. We have to do it in the practical way that Daniel, that all the folks there at the Complexity Weekend are trying us to do it. And that's what I want to provide with within the Complexity Weekend is ideas, close them, relate them, and then try to solve some issues in the real world.
Awesome. To identify and connect, because no one of us are going to be on top of the mountain to identify everything, and then to connect with other participants in the cohort who we might be able to take some steps towards that goal with. So Michaela, if you'd like to say hello, give a little introduction, and then maybe talk about intention.
So hi, thanks Daniel, and hi Edgar. Finally, I meet you in almost real. So yeah, my involvement with Complexity Weekend is this is my second big cohort, and I've been around for some of the heartbeats. Love the community, think it's fantastic to go across disciplines and time zones and different people. And my intention today is to continue to link people with diverse backgrounds and clear intentions to make this a better place.
Awesome. So we'll, if either of you ever have a thought, you can just raise your hand or add a post-it note, but let's start to just look at what participants are writing. So, an intention to be impeccable with their word, for there's no try in this area, only do or do not. Interesting intention. Would love to develop understanding of this space and learn. Also fun. Welcome, Justin.
Hello.
How goes it? Welcome to the stream where we're just chilling on a Jamboard. Maybe if you'd like to say hello and any intentions to start off this weekend.
Hello, I'm Justin. As far as intentions, I think it's just to learn and just have an open mind. And I don't want to, go into it expecting to completely change the world in a weekend. I think that it should be more of like a place to meet like-minded or maybe not so like-minded people to help push things forward. And we'll see what comes out of it. This is really cool.
Fun. So we'll read some of these as they come in. So move the needle on the knowledge about complexity for a wider audience. So that sounds a lot like what Justin was saying. Like, we're not going to move the needle from, 2 to 200, but from 2 to 2.1, if it's in the right direction, that's a good start for 72 hours. I want to increase relations by intercultural, transdisciplinary thoughts. And yes, think about the big and small problems. There's the big problems, the ones that we hear about every day and the common phrases. And then there's the small problems and getting it together. All the tiny little problems or the little frustrations of getting the calendars connected. But then we realize complex systems, big things and small things. Maybe there's a relationship between some of the big problems and some of the small problems, like intercultural and transdisciplinary connection or collaboration. So network and build bridges. Awesome. Be open to people and ideas with an explorer's curiosity. Keep calm and carry on. Maybe Michaela, as a repeat facilitator, amidst it all, how do we keep calm and carry on?
So far, I never had to keep calm because people are very respectful in this community, and I really value that. There's no really heated arguments. I think we should just go and show up to everybody's sessions and listen in, and if it's something for you or you have crazy questions or whatever, just ask them with a beginner's mindset and see where it takes everybody, and then you can connect informally. In Gather or elsewhere, and I think that's a start. And of course, respect is a very big asset of this community, and I really enjoy that.
Awesome. Just to highlight a few more of these intentions. So meet potential co-authors. Maybe there are those who would like to write something together, whether it's a fantasy fiction or it's a scientific research paper. Maybe somebody would like to form some type of a business or make some other type of outcome. So just knowing that different people have different intentions, and it might be bringing exactly what you were looking for. It might be something you totally would have never expected. And you're going to look back on this on Monday and go, wait, on Thursday, I didn't know I was going to be in a startup, or I didn't know that we would be on the road towards working towards something, but that happens. And then this is one more fun point, just like Sean has always been bringing up with applying complexity means thinking about it in the specifics of a system. Like, we can talk about phase transitions and fractals, but then there's the real specific systems. So this is fun. Figure out how I can apply complexity to my small condo with 42 units. How can we be better agents for the solution to climate change? It makes me think about those big and small problems. It's one thing to say, well, apartment buildings should just retrofit with this or that. But it's a different question when, how can I change the little bit that I do have? Now it's more than many have, but it's a starting place. Yes, please, Edgar.
So, for example, these kind of ideas are really interesting because within complexity, you can start by doing or trying to focus on the small things that could change the big part of the systems. So, for example, here in Mexico, in the subway, one thing that they do that was really, really awesome is just to put signs on the floor for people to step outside of the entrance within the subway, and that makes an emergent ordering kind of thing that saves a lot of money for the subway just by going out. So small things count, and if you have a problem and you can identify how to change a small thing, yeah, that could be a great thing for the whole systems.
Cool. And then this is a great example. Reach out to me. My mom got a law change related to this. Not sure which one that was attached to, so I'll let Barb place it where it's appropriate. But that's what happens when you put out an intention. It doesn't have to be so metaphysical when you make a direct ask, and somebody might just be like, oh, I'm working on that, or oh, I was doing that yesterday. So let me just help you with that, because we're all here to help each other out in a community. So many awesome answers just in the first few minutes, and we're going to return to it. We're going to return to our intention, and we're going to include those who are not live right now. Let's go to the 5th slide, which is, who are you and how did you discover complexity? So definitely facilitators. I know you may have addressed it in your intro videos, all of which were awesome, by the way, but it'd be great to hear because we're in different countries as facilitators, so many different backgrounds. So how did you discover complexity and how has that played into who and how you are today?
I can go. So complexity theory and science, I was recently introduced to via Sean, actually. Sean Applegate Swanson introduced me to this, and it is quite a rabbit hole that I was not expecting. And, you know, it's funny because everything in the world, well, not everything, but like the world is full of complexity, right? So it's interesting that there is like this, it's almost like this, it's this whole discipline of being able to look at the world in this new way. But it's also not so new because we've been living in it, forever, right? Or like, humans have lived in these complex systems, arguably like since the beginning of humanity. So it's really interesting. Yeah. And I know that like, there's so much that I have yet to learn. There's probably like a million books I should be reading about complexity science, to just kind of better familiarize myself with it. But it's also something that I think anyone can jump into, at any point, no matter like what their knowledge level is, as it relates to like complexity science, because like, we all are living in it. And, at the end of the day, complexity is it's really just like complex systems and like understanding how they work. And it's going to be impossible for anyone to understand, every single system. Right. So that's my take on it. And that's how, I've discovered it.
Thank you, Justin. Edgar or Michaela?
Okay, so my story with complexity is like a love story, really to happen. When I was studying my bachelor degree in math, I was discovering these systems, nonlinear dynamical systems. Lots of equations with those kind of attractors and really well designed graphs. Then, well, I just jumped into physics for the master's degree, and I started to learn a lot about collective behavior, and it was really interesting. So, is there something like a framework or a theory that's going and explain all of this? And what I found is that it's a theory on the going, a framework on the going that's complexity science, and when you start to be in this part of the history of science in which you discover a new theory on the making, I imagine myself like in the times when physics was not the straight line that we have right now, but was something like people sit on the cafes and say, okay, this new thing called physics, and they talk about protons, neutrons, and all that stuff. But that's the thing that we are doing now in complexity. We are trying to understand relations, understand mathematical tools like networks and all those things to do this. But this is the time in which everybody can contribute to complexity, because it's something that goes around a lot of things in society, in nature, even in things that are not part of the real world right now. For example, you will hear talking a lot about complexity in the metaverses, like this one that we are doing right now. So please jump into complexity. I think it's a love story for you too.
Thank you, Edgar. Michaela?
I bumped into complexity without knowing it through epistemology when I was at university studying chaos theory and the emergence of science and how you fossilize it, kind of. And 20 or 30 years later, through biomimicry, everything in nature is a complex system, and this is how I ended up here. So, and that's where I discovered that actually complexity is everywhere, and things that we label complicated or unsolvable can be solved with the correct lens to look at it, and all together, of course.
Thanks. So just to read a couple of the awesome answers, and we'll see some themes maybe arising. So step by step, random chance to systems thinking, which was also brought up here. Systems thinking narrative makes so much more sense than the so-called hard sciences. And they said systems thinking and many, many branches to complexity with surely more to come. RJ wrote, when working on educational technology, dealing with problems related to mapping subject matter, so knowledge management and learning and education and communication. Brian never wanted to specialize in a single field, eventually stumbled upon complexity through generality. So there's a lot of people who are looking at systems and generalizations and patterns across systems. Those are big terms that come up in complexity. And then what's also so fun and speaks to the modern and serendipitous and online nature of learning and applying complexity is like complex paths. Passing by Participatory Futures Slack and via post of Alex Barnes, who's one of our facilitators, Alex Tio. Personally exploring indigenous approaches to nurture conditions for emergence. So a lot of people on their personal path are bumping around on a Slack or on social media. And so there's kind of the serendipity. And I know Sid added this little Caltrain. That's the San Francisco train system where we met in person back in the day. And so it's like, there's the people door, there's the ideas and the generalization door, there's nature, there's the theory of everything, the idea of a big toe, not the one that you have two of, but the theory of everything, led me years back to complexity science. I continue to follow this spiral journey, which led me here, going deeper on the spiral. So theories of everything and patterns across systems, but then also just asking questions. Discovered complexity from asking big questions, questioning assumptions, asking too many questions, putting a word on the way I feel, and I have been really unsatisfied with the linear learning model. So it's like, there's so many doors in, and we're all here. That's kind of the fun part, is however somebody came to join the cohort, whether it's 40 years ago, looking at the application of nonlinear systems approaches in physics, chemical systems, and geo and biological systems, whether you've been thinking about the world around us as a complex system for 40 years and you knew it, or whether you haven't been alive for 40 years, but you've been thinking about these questions, all of these archetypes can come together and we can just have a yes and approach to our understandings of complexity. Let's go to the next slide, 6, which is a little empty, at least to start with, but people, of course, can add pictures and draw and add notes. Here we have learning and applying. And that's sort of what was addressed earlier or asked earlier in the live chat was, what does it look like to learn by doing? What does it look like to apply complexity? And how will we as a community of practice enable that? And so what will that look like? How will we integrate learning and applying? So while people are writing some notes and giving thoughts, do any of the facilitators, like, what does this bring to mind? How do we learn while we are applying, or apply while we're learning, or find some sort of middle space or two birds with one stone mode for interacting with complexity?
I'll
Yes,
go.
please.
So I want to preface this with the idea that maybe like don't like study complexity just to study complexity, right? Like I think it's important to study what you're interested in, right? So learn about the systems that you're interested in, not because they're complex, because they're interesting to you, right? And then I think you can start to unpack like maybe why it's complex. I'm sure that there are many different approaches you can use to better understand complex systems, which we'll be talking about obviously throughout this whole weekend. And I think the learning and applying, I think they're together, right? I think like in a lot of this, you need to learn by doing. You can read all the knowledge of all the books in the world, but I feel like there are certain things that you just really won't fully understand unless you are immersed in it, and actually like trying to solve those problems or trying to build those things, right? I really do think that that's important. A lot of this is like visceral learning that can't really be fully intellectualized. So that's where the learning by doing comes in. So I think they're connected. I think learning and applying what you've learned, right? And it is this cycle, like what is happening right here. It's this constant, like you're learning, you're doing, you're learning, you're doing, and you're compounding the progress that way.
Very interesting. Thank you, Justin. Either Edgar or Michaela?
Yeah, I was just wondering which one is easier to start with. I definitely started by trying to apply things and it didn't work, so I had to learn from it rather than learn and try to apply it. So yeah, I think applying is the start for me. It's probably different for other people.
So great question. Where to start? How do I start? And there's almost a side door. Now, there are no side doors at Complexity Weekend. Everyone is participating in a role. But where do we start with learning and applying? And there is a side door. It's actually community. And that's what many complexity enthusiasts or complexity curious individuals realize that was missing. Because sometimes where to start, it's easy to start with a question to a friend or to a person who maybe you've watched their facilitator intro video. So even just saying, I don't know where to start learning or applying in the context of a relationship or community, that's so powerful because that starts you into this cycle of action and inference that develops you on your complexity journey. Let's just roll with the Post-its as they come. Where's communicating in this duality? Great question. Michaela, I know. Oh, yes, please. Edgar first and then Michaela.
Yeah, so I think in between this ongoing and agile way of learning by doing, applying, we should know ourselves first, know if we want to do big steps or small steps, because some people is more like doing the kind of very scientific work, gathering a lot of data, then trying to look into the system that those data are describing, and then applying or discovering some theories. But there is this other way in which you can start by having a community, some kind of friends trying to understand some big problem, pitch out the relationships that you think are the parts of that system, and then trying to understand if they are related with each other. Then do the social thing. Ask an expert. Here are facilitators. If you even try to dare to ask to people at the universities or something that knows a lot, you can go and try to ask, okay, I have this question about this system. I have this question about this behavior in particular. Can you explain that to me? And at the end, communication is like the key to learn and then to start apply.
Thank you, Edgar. Michaela?
Yeah, I was thinking about where is communication in learning and applying. I think it's everywhere. It's like the context. You need communication to learn and to teach. You need communication to apply. You need to be able to communicate what you learn and what you applied. So I think it's like a context thing.
Thanks. Justin?
Yeah, yes. I agree. I think communication is key. You need to be able to communicate what you've learned, right? Whether you've learned it by doing or some other way. I think learning by doing, just to like go back to that, is more durable in some ways than just learning by maybe like reading or like non-doing tasks, non-doing things. Also, I think it's important to know how you learn, right? I think that's important. Children in school, right? Everyone's trying to understand, like the teachers are trying to understand, what's their learning style. And I think being self-aware and knowing what your learning style is very important, because some people are better at hearing, right? So like maybe like more, if you're going to get information into your brain, maybe listening to podcasts is better. Or some people do learn better, they get information better rather by reading, right? So I think it's really important to understand that. And then it's also important, this goes back to communication, it's important to understand how the people that you're working with learn the best, so that you can present what you've learned to them in a format that is easily digestible, or that is like the most efficient way for them to learn. I think that it's really important, if you're going to be a leader, to understand how your team learns for that reason, right? It kind of it oils the machine a bit more when you do it that way.
Thank you, Justin. So you mentioned learning styles, awesome. And then there's applying styles. Maybe you have a lot of bandwidth, but it's very unpredictable. So asynchronously, you love collaborating on projects, but it's unlikely you're going to be able to make that weekly meeting. Blue mentioned earlier, it's the weekly meeting that keeps the beat moving, at least for the projects that we're on. And so knowing that we all have different styles of learning, applying, and relating in community, that's starting to sound like a very coherent experience. And then this is an awesome comment. So I think a direct consequence is to keep pushing boundaries of any given topic and pause to appreciate the intersections and explore cracks, inner and outer. And so this gave me the image of like a piece of pottery, maybe with a crack, maybe with no crack. And you have all the experts and they're walking around it, and where's it going to break? Where is it fragile? All of these questions, but that's on the learning side. They might measure everything about it. They might discuss and make theoretical models, but then things change as soon as the system is acted upon. They put a balloon inside and they just increase it a little bit. And where do those cracks form? Now, maybe it's exactly what you thought. Amazing. Great. Nice work with the model, but it might not be. And so that's where the real world comes into play, and this action and inference cycle is really exhibited best. Justin?
Yeah, this reminds me of a notion that I don't remember where I heard it, but it talks about getting outside of your comfort zone, right? And like you don't grow unless you get outside of your comfort zone, right? Like it's like building muscle. Like your muscles aren't going to grow unless you're pushing yourself and you're tearing the muscle, right? You're literally tearing your muscles. So I think that that can also like be an analogy for learning and applying, right? It's like do things that are not necessarily comfortable, but that are going to help you to grow.
Thanks, Justin. And then here's another important piece. We need complexity-oriented ethics. Yes, there's an ethics to learning and to teaching, and there's an ethics to applying. And this just shows why it's so important to have this participatory feedback nature, because these are words that, one person might not just put onto the page. Not everybody thinks of ethics when they think of complexity, but I know that many of you do. And we all could at least integrate that perspective into especially how we apply. So that's just so fun that people can raise points like, what is a complexity-oriented ethic? Even just that question, I'm pretty sure you could spend the rest of your life learning and applying related to that question. So for some, maybe they think, yeah, again, that's my day job. I'm doing complexity ethics all day. Other people, it's the first time they thought that complexity might be connected to something like ethics or philosophy. So really fun to see about learning and applying. Any last comments before we continue onwards? Okay, fun. So let's go to number 7. So slide number 7. How can complexity have impact in real-world systems? How have you successfully applied complexity or not? How and where would you want to apply complexity? So, where does applied complexity pop up in the world? That was a cool image somebody just pasted on there and removed, but where does complexity have impact? Yeah, Justin.
I mean, I think that, you know, there are so many complex systems in the world. Like, we are constantly interfacing with complex systems, right? So I think that when you say, okay, I have a question for you, Daniel. When you say, how can complexity have impact in real world systems? Are you referring specifically to complexity science or theory? Is that what you're referring to here?
Great question. Oh, awesome image. Look, a squirrel. No, I can speak to it, but that's something I'm always curious about, as many organizers and facilitators are. So it's almost like,
Yeah.
Are we talking about complex systems? What is the difference between complexity, complex systems, complexity theory? I thought theories make predictions. What about complexity as a framework? Complexity science? Is it science? How is it related to the kind of science that we might have learned in our education in different types of schools? So those are all really important questions. So you asked, though, how can complexity have impact, and whether that's us applying complexity science or whether it's kind of complexity rearing its head. So let's go with that complexity rearing its head. Where might virality or contagion models or network spread or phase transitions or emergence have impact in the real world? So that's like some of these answers that people are writing here. Anywhere you can find ecosystems, any humanity-rich interaction, any network. So where does complexity as a toolkit of terms and concepts come into play? Every day, it is the impact on real-world systems. Yes, please, Edgar.
Yeah, so there is this big history about complexity, and you can start looking at complexity from the very beginning of time, like a physicist, and think about, how are complex physical system working out between the relations in a neutron star or something like that, to go from that small machine to the big machines of that are the stars or the universe right now. Then you can start to think about the complex system from the society point of view, the adaptive point of view. You can even think about complex systems on the cultural point of view. And if you are following what I say, is each one of these systems have one key thing. They are composed of different entities, and if you want to have an impact on a real world system, you have to choose one of those systems with the entities that you want to impact. So, for example, you want to impact in a cultural system. What is culture? It's the big question to ask. Then what is the system in the culture? Then what is the complexity endowed in that system? And all those questions that you can have, and the ones that you, especially the people who see in this, can come with that and ask, because what we need is a lot of questions to understand this system, to understand this complexity, and that's something that we can have a real impact on the world, like asking a bunch of questions and trying to understand better the complexity thing in the world.
Thank you, Edgar. That's almost exactly what I was thinking of for that second mode. So that first mode is, where do phase transitions matter in the world? Well, every time somebody melts an ice cube, or every time something is cast from plastic. How do we apply complexity? And you just gave a walkthrough, really, for how we start with the specifics of us as individuals or relationships or teams, and we approach some system of interest in the world. And then you said, you can identify the systems and identify the complexity and what key terms, which we learned from this just truly rich forest of terms that we're always just running around and swinging around in. And then we ask, well, okay, how do we use this complexity concept when we're thinking about the system we're going to design for that public transit system, or for that nutrients analysis in food, or for organizational design? So that's applying complexity in a team context, because that team is actually using the word complexity, if they want to, and or some of these essential terms to just keep the bigger picture in mind. And that's applying complexity. So that's so interesting. Now, the final product doesn't always have like a, made in complexity stamp. Not everybody even uses the same word, because not everyone is even using English. So it's totally all good. And that's actually one of the fun things, is a lot of applied complexity is scattered. It's kind of not in a coherent single place. But especially as we develop the knowledge management resources of Complexity Weekend, like our wiki, we'll have a link for where has complexity been applied in ecosystems. And there'll be educational materials, people to contact, projects outside of Complexity Weekend, projects inside Complexity Weekend, so that every type of answer from a specific person, a specific project, it would have been this way, but it went this way because they included complexity during the application design. Those are some of the ways to address that. So here's some of the other, Justin.
I really liked your example of like, if you're going to be putting down like a mass transit system, right? Understanding how that is going to affect other systems around it, right? I think that's a really important example, because there are so many big projects that are underway around the world, and it'd be interesting to know how much they are considering, the interconnectedness of them to ensure that these other systems are either being affected positively, or in a way that to mitigate negative change amongst these other systems that are connected to it, those the projects that are happening.
Yes, so that's a lot like this image that somebody posted. So here we have culture, policy, economics, and technology. And they're all kind of sending each other little arrows. And this is a nice visual representation of truly a deep end of complex systems modeling. And that's why when we go to those more familiar colleagues and friends and participants in the cohort, there are people who take these kinds of flowcharts and really connect them to real world systems. Because if you just over-engineer one part, we want the bus line to work this way, something else might be ending up taking a hit. So it'd be like if in medicine, maybe we were only being treated at the organ level. Here's how we're going to optimize just this one parameter of just this one organ, and the system's health could suffer from that kind of a focus that didn't see the bigger picture. So it's an ongoing question. 100 years ago, the computational tools didn't exist to do complex systems modeling of society. So it's a different time. Previously, people could say, well, feedbacks are important between culture, policy, economics, and technology. But now, all of these domains have computers in the loop, and there's unprecedented access to data and modeling and simulation tools. So it becomes especially important to include, hopefully in community, all these different perspectives, because those who can make the quantitative models also benefit from having so many other thoughts and perspectives on impacts kept in mind. Justin?
Yeah, you just inspired me to think about whether there are any is there any standardization in terms of like modeling complex systems, right? Because if everyone kind of followed some sort of framework, some sort of like standard model that, so that everyone's complex system could connect in some way programmatically, then we could really start to put some computational power, against all this data in a more structured way, right? I mean, of course, we can use unstructured data, and like there are lots of like AI, kind of approaches to doing that, but it might be more efficient. We might be able to more effectively predict and forecast if there was some sort of standardization in terms of data models for this.
Great point and question. So there are some efforts to make unified toolkits for modeling, like CAD and other packages. It also reminds me of the comic, there's 14 USB standards, and then someone says, well, let's integrate them, and now there's 15. So how do we work in complexity when there isn't a standard? There's not a test or a certificate or a competency for being in the community, and there's not a way to just say, well, this is a complexity model or not. And so what does sense making look like? And as the field continues to evolve of applied complexity, will there be some norms? Like, what if the file type had metadata about the ethics? That's wide open, but that's something that's not considered unless we were having these important insights from the previous slide. So complexity is a space for us to ask those big questions, Justin, like how do we integrate across data sets? And then maybe that integration isn't just a new file type. Maybe it's something more unified, like a toolkit and a community and an approach and norms and all these other pieces that aren't just the bits and the bytes. Let's look at some of these fun examples. So if we don't learn to understand and work with complex system, we are not going to make it. NGMI, not going to make it. No. Complex economy, stock markets. This person wrote, unintended consequences are made visible. That's really important. So part of our value of serving through deep time, it's not serving through deep time if you finish the job at the end of the first day and it's worse when you leave. That's not service through deep time. So those are unintended consequences through deep time. They happen. And so how do we design around that? So let's see this comment. I see exactly the opposite. Excellent. Always important to have a diversity of perspectives and respectful discussion like this. So it's a yes and with all these views. Each system has unique behavior, and the same system has different models at different levels of granularity and differences in where you draw the system. Yes, there's so many ways to partition systems. It's like the map is not the territory. So when we're talking about complexity and complexity modeling, we're talking about our maps of the territory. And someone says, well, I drew mine on a piece of cloth and I love art, so it looks this way. And somebody else says, my map is a program and it's running in the cloud. That's okay, because there are two different maps. And contention can arise when people think, well, we're not in the same territory because we don't have the exact same way of phrasing it, or we don't focus on the same pieces. But we are focusing on the same territory. We just want to think and be mindful about that gap between the map and the territory, because that's where the interpretation and the richness of interaction and each individual's uniqueness really comes through. Like, everyone has looked at food. Everyone has interacted with medicine. Everyone has been involved in transportation. But it's actually by thinking about how our maps might speak to that territory that we're actually going to start thinking about the kinds of interventions in a system that could have a tremendous impact. Maybe you sketch out the system this way and you rewire something, or you change one of these feedback loops, and the system comes to a totally new position in its phase space. So there's so many cool things that people are adding onto here. So this is very close to the end of the first live stream. What we're gonna do is just show on this first live stream, like for those who are just checking in and watching this opening live stream after the fact, just to review a few of the things that we'll talk about in the future live streams, but also in the cohort gather space. This Jamboard is embedded, so you can return to it at any time, and we're going to use it at each live stream. So no worries if you're not watching along live, because it's all going to be part of the cohort experience. We're going to be talking about teams as we head from the beginning, where it's like, whoa, what is complexity, and getting our footing and finding a shared truth and meeting a couple participants, talking in Gather, having a few conversations, sending a few messages in Keybase, joining a few Explore teams, and just kind of tuning in. And then in the middle of the weekend, whenever that is for you, we're going to be thinking about teams and returning to those two commitments that the organizers and the facilitators will embody, which is, one, if you want to be on a team, whether you want to start a team or you want to join a team, we will help you get on a team. And then two, once you're on a team and your team has formed, especially if they fill out the registration form, then we'll help that team. So if you just want to chill and you don't want to be on a team, that's totally fine. But we want to encourage those who do want to form a team to do so. And the team doesn't have to be like, we're applying for a grant in 3 weeks. A team can be like a book club or a discussion group. So it doesn't have to be tackling the biggest problem or have the specific approach in mind. We only have less than 72 hours or something like that. I mean, it's an amazingly short period of time that the weekend actually is. Every weekend, actually, but this one especially. The weekend's too short. Don't we always say that? And we're just going to be in this sort of temporal tip of the iceberg, connecting with our cohort and maybe changing our trajectory, maybe introducing a new practice that's important, maybe connecting with somebody who we go on to develop a team with. So we'll definitely be talking about teams. We'll be talking about community support, like what individuals are interested in providing or what they're looking for. I'm sure some people would like to learn a skill that somebody else would love to teach them, or some other type of connection that's possible when we are in this kind of a community of practice. So we'll return to that. What makes Complexity Weekend an amazing space? So I think it was Jana who had added some of these on previous Heartbeat organizing when we were making the Jamboards. It's not just like plus and minus. I think these are just very rich terms like appreciations and desires. What do we appreciate that we see? What would we love to see and implement? And then without undue judgment, just where are there tensions and frictions? You know, this application is slow, or I couldn't use this feature on this device. So these are some of the ways that we highlight what we love about Complexity Weekend and also provide kind of like real-time feedback. And there are many channels for doing so. And then we add slides because the book on complexity is not done. So we just add slides as we go through the weekend and someone says, we should add a slide on just this one topic or this one question. Great, let's do it. The last slide I'll go to, and then we can just have some closing thoughts from the facilitators. This is from Innovators Box and Monica. Just some general thoughts on online collaboration that are important to keep in mind, like using active listening, being curious and open, assuming kindness, playing by our strengths, and over communicating. So good, important advice for any topic. And this is kind of like share ideas, resources, etc. Leave emojis. I mean, we could add all of the fun participation guidelines, and there's space for you to do so. So please add ideas and resources just like this pink Post-it person added. So that is near the end for the first live stream. To our awesome facilitators here, would you like to give any thoughts, or just like, what are you looking forward to in the next few hours?
I think everybody should have fun and also dare to engage with people they would not usually engage with, and see where it takes them. Welcome. I'm having a session in 5 minutes.
Awesome. Thank you, Michaela. Edgar or Justin?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo that. Like, have a good time. Try to learn as much as you can, and forge some great relationships, and hopefully some good comes out of this, and we can push the world forward.
Thank you, Justin. Edgar?
Okay, so I think this weekend I'm gonna have fun. I'm gonna be radiant. I'm gonna be hungry. I'm gonna be inner talk thinking, outer talk thinking with all the people. I want a lot of questions for you to come and ask. I will not have all the answers, and or perhaps I will have very contradictory points of view of what you are saying. But that's what this is for. It's about interactions and about doing complexity with our hands and with our minds. Thank you.
Awesome. So, facilitators, thanks for joining this live stream. Hope it was a fun experience for you. You can walk off the mat, and hope to see you at a later live stream. So, to those who are listening along, if you're listening live, we're going to end this live stream. If you're not listening live, then cool. I hope you know what time it is wherever you're at. We're going to go into Gather now. So take a 5-minute break before the sessions begin in a couple of minutes. And we'll see you in Gather, see you in Keybase. Thanks so much for watching to the end of this video. And we hope that you have an awesome time participating in Complexity Weekend through Deep Time. So, peace, everybody.